So if you can draw rectangles within the canvas, you should be able to draw circles as well. And it's more than just circles. You can draw arcs. And in this case, I have a couple arcs that go all the way around and then are filled with some gradients. So we're picking up some speed here, and this demo attempts to show you how you can do a number of different things at one time within the canvas. So once I have my context ready to me, the first thing that I'll do is all of this code here is concerned with creating a radiant brush, basically. So I'm creating a radial gradient, and by doing that, I'll be able to take that radial gradient and apply it to an arc that I create later within the procedural code here. So in order to do that, the first thing that I want to do is create the x-coordinate of the start of the gradient. So if we take a look back here, you can see that I have a dark blue color that gradiates out to a lighter blue color. So I'm telling this gradient where I want it to start that start color. I can put it in the middle, I can put it in the side, I can put it wherever I want. I'm telling it to start at 160, 120 within the grid. And the radius of the start circle is 0, so I'm starting it at a single point. The end gradient that I'm creating for this gradient, where the color will end, is at point 320 and 220. And then the radius of the end circle is 300. So it's going from a single point out to a radius of 300 for this gradient. And then I add color stops within the gradient. The first argument here is the gradient offset. Now it's a range between 0 and 1. So that's the range of the full gradation. If you added other color stops in here, if you wanted it to be in the middle, you would add an offset of 0.5 for that color stop to show up in the middle. So it's values between 0 and 1 for the offset value for add color stop. And then you tell it what colors that you want it to go between. So this is a white and this is a blue. And so I'm gradiating between those two colors. So once I have that gradient set up, I can apply it to an arc or a circle on the canvas. So to create the base circle, I'm giving it a line width of 0, stroke style of black, and I'm saying the fill style right now is set to this gradient that I just created. And then I can say begin path. I'm about to create a path in the context, and then I'm creating an arc. The arguments for this method follow the same pattern of what you've seen before. We start off with the x-coordinate of the start of the arc and the y-coordinate of the start of the arc. So we're giving the point in the grid of where to start, and then the radius and the start angle and the end angle. So I can pass in math pi times 2. And then this value here, anti-clockwise, this tells you whether or not you're building your arc going clockwise or counterclockwise. And this becomes valuable when you're not creating circles, but you're only doing like a partial arc. And at that point, what I can do is say fill, and it creates the arc and fills it with the gradient that I passed in. So the idea and the trick in order to create what looks like sort of a beveled button is that you create a layer that has a gradient on it, and then you create another layer that has a gradient on it, but that same gradient except it's flipped and going in the other direction, and that's how you kind of get that pushed in sort of look. So that's what I've done here. Within the next item, I've created another radial gradient, and the code here seems a little more compact just because I haven't added in the comments for you. But the same thing goes, we have the x and y coordinate, the radius of the start circle, x and y coordinate of the end of the gradient, and the radius of the end circle, all done with these values here. So it's a little bit smaller than the first one. I'm adding in 2 color stops, again the same values of the white and the blue, and then I'm saying that the fill style of the context is equal to that gradient. I'm creating another arc that's just a little bit smaller than the one that I had before, and then I'm telling it to fill. Finally, in order to get the text on that button, or the letter P, I'm setting the fill style to white, and then the font equal to a 300 pixel size of Sego UI. And then I'm saying fill text, passing in the text of P, and giving an XY coordinate of where I want it to show up. But notice how everything is working within the canvas here. The fill style gets set a couple of different times. When we say fill, whatever the fill style is set to is what's being used. So what I want you to have firm in your mind is the fact that when you're using the context, you use basically what it amounts to is one tool at a time. You're working with one shape at a time. You don't have these long API structures of of creating a circle and applying the gradient to that and loading that into a collection and doing all these things. You're basically thinking of using a brush or using a pencil on the canvas, doing something with it, applying that color and moving on to the next thing.